Forward to the cloud. Perfect. Thank you, everyone, again for your patience. So yes, as Betty, or as I was mentioning before, we're going to go over some definitions, and then at the end of the investigation type questions, we're also going to give you guys some resources for how you might, do some further research. So thank you all again for your patience and really interested in getting us started here. Okay, so I have this recorded. Now, does anybody want to give me some indications in the chat of like some animal signs that they have seen before out in the wild? We kind of define animal sign as anything that animals leave behind. So I'm kind of wondering, does anybody have some that they might want to input into the chat and give us some information about? That way we can get it started on a discussion on what it's all about.
We have some folks mentioning Scat as some of the things that they've seen. Prints, rubs, scratchings, like scratching spots, carcasses and feeding debris, tree rubs, actual like deer trails in the woods and burrows and skulls and bones and rooting and bird tracks. They've seen them at Alviso.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah,
I love
that's
finding some good
lot of
bird
different
tracks.
things.
Does anybody consider woodpecker holes to be sign? That one would be a good one. That's one that I see often at Rancho.
Yes. Folks are even saying they've seen big and little mountain lion tracks, cache spots, lawns that are dug up, so into burrows and stuff like that.
How about like a feral hog sign? That's a pretty common one that we see in our local open spaces.
Rooting.
Yeah.
The rooting and bird poop on their cars. That's definitely evidence of animals and mole mounds and stuff like that.
That is very cool. I'm loving like all of the input that we're getting. I'm trying to also get people back in to participants.
Yeah, squirrel holes, sheds as well. So sheds like maybe I'm thinking snakes or lizards or things like that. Mm-hmm. Owl pellets. Ron has seen owl pellets. Coot feet and antler sheds. Fur stuck on barbed wire. So yeah, quite a few.
Very cool.
Do you think, Kat, you could make me back into a co-host? Did you try doing that?
I have not.
Do you want to try to do that? Feathers and including drops by raptors. That perfect. Yes. Then I can let folks in now.
Sorry about that. I kind of got distracted by all the cool stuff that people were talking about. So very awesome. Mm-hmm. Skeletons.
Lots and lots of different examples.
This is awesome. I'm glad because it looks like we already have a really enriching group so far. So I'm actually going to have Rick start this part of this discussion. We wanted to start with mentioning that tracking is an imperfect art. And he had a really good explanation of this for me while we were discussing this program. So Rick, do you want to describe why we consider tracking to be an imperfect art?
Well, I kind of, I had the image of it when we discussed it earlier. Well, tracking is imperfect because the signs that the animals leave behind, whether they're tracks, scat, urine, feeding signs, or pellets, or trails, shelters, even skulls and bones, they sometimes mimic other animals. And oftentimes you do not see a perfect track that's easy to read. You just see parts of it, or the substrate is not friendly for reading a clear track. So it is basically developing, saying like, oh, I'm 60% confident that this is a coyote track, or I'm pretty sure that, maybe 75% sure that this is a barn owl pellet or something like that. So it's imperfect, but with practice, you're able to raise your level of confidence.
Awesome. And I think as a part of that, we also discussed how you have to look at multiple lines of evidence to really determine what something might be. And so for tracking, we highly recommend, really getting into it and looking at several lines of evidence when you go out and you see evidence. When you see some parts, then start looking for others around the area, because you might be able to tell a larger story based on what you see. Very awesome. So when we go out, we're going to go out with some impressions in our mind as to what tracking is. And we would like you, when you go out, to widen your horizons as to what that could be. So when I go out, I'm thinking about what happened in the area recently. Like, did it rain recently? What is the water levels like in the creeks? What kind of resources might be available for local animals? What habitat am I in? And obviously, for us, it's also about where can you find tracks? When can you find them? Like, the substrate is going to be really important if you're going to be looking specifically for tracks. We often find tracks in soft mud or clay, sand, or soft dirt. Think of fluffed up dirt that's, been groomed. And you'll find these places usually like along creek sides, beaches, and a favorite spot is actually our trails. You would be very surprised at how animals use our trails as thoroughfares for getting from one place to another. So at the end of this talk, we will actually be talking about some ways that you can create your own track recording device in your own yard. So then you can help monitor some of the species or, general groups of animals that might be coming and going. So to start off, we kind of wanted to present a little bit of a framework. And I'm going to let Rick take this one on, because we discussed this one in depth, and Rick had some really good ideas with this.
Well, we picked two sets of tracks of animals that most people are familiar with, and this is two different family of animals. And to help identify the animal, we look at the attributes of the track. So on to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things we note is the number of toes. And each of these, the toes that show in the track. In this case, we have 4 toes showing, and other animals like deer, hogs, sheep, they have 2 toes, and sometimes you have animals that have more toes, such as bears, raccoons, weasels, skunks, and those would be 5. And some have mixture of 4 and 5. And of course, we all know which ones just have 1 toe. Okay, let's go on.
Yeah.
Then another attribute to help decide or to help move our identification meter one way or the other is the shape of the track. In this case, the one on the left is round and the one on the right is oval.
Mm-hmm. And this is really helpful for when you can't necessarily identify toes or other attributes.
Right, like this would be a perfect one for soft sand. Okay, so, and when you can, like in a mud, you can pick out the claw marks. And in this case, the one on the right, you can see definite blunt nails. Sometimes in really deep substrate like snow, the one on the left might show thin claw marks or nails, but in most cases they are they're not present in the track.
Yeah. So looking at the presence or non-presence of nails.
Okay, then another attribute is the metacarpal pad, or sometimes known as the heel pad. And there's several attributes within the metacarpal pad. One is the one on the left has 3 lobes on the back. And this is more evident when the track is really clear in mud. The one on the right just has 2 lobes. And the one on the left has 2 lobes on the leading edge of the metacarpal pad. The one on the right just has a single lobe.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice the one on the left, the track on the left, the bigger track on the left has 2 distinct separated front lobes, and the one next to it is 2 lobes, but they're closer together, and that will become important later. And then also another important characteristic is the relative size of the metacarpal pad to the toes. The one on the left, most of the toes could fit in the metacarpal pad. The one on the right, the metacarpal pad is a much smaller area relative to the toes. So that's another important identifying characteristic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then also negative space. The one on the left, you see a C upside down. It fits inside the negative space rather well. And the one on the right, you can draw an X in between the toes and the metacarpal pad without crossing over. And then another classic attribute is to look at the asymmetry of the track. If you drew a line right through the metacarpal pad, right through the center of it, up through the middle of the toes, if you folded over that line, it would be symmetrical on the right set of tracks. But on the left, you notice there's a leading toe. And it's similar to a human hand with the thumb hidden, and the leading, so you could actually put your hand right over the track and match the toes up such that your middle finger is the leading finger. So the one on the left, you can say that that is your that's a left-footed track because of the leading edge of the toe, because that matches up with your left hand. Okay. So now these are all the attributes. There's other attributes, but these are the most popular attributes to investigate. Altogether, these are one on the left are attributes of a feline, and the one on the right is of a canine. Sometimes there's a slight difference between, say, a domestic dog and a coyote, say, for instance, on the canine, whereas you could draw the X through the, as shown there, without touching the metacarpal pad or the toes, whereas on a dog it would be more of an H, which is also similar to that of a fox. But anyways, this kind of gives you a high level overview of being able to look at the attributes of a track. And even though you may not see all of them, if you get enough of them, they can raise your confidence to the point where it says, oh yeah, I'm pretty certain that this is a canine track.
This is actually probably also the most common question that we get as land managers or, as interpreters is, what kind of track was that? Is it a large dog or is it a mountain lion? And having some of these identifiers in your back pocket kind of help you with some of those most common questions. And again, we're going to have a bunch of resources at the end of our presentation. So if you are interested in diving deeper, which we do highly recommend because there's so much more to this, we want you to do that. So we'll get there. The other aspect of tracks isn't just looking at the tracks, though, is it, Rick? It's also looking at a bigger picture, like a whole trail.
Yes. Right. So then we have the track patterns. So here we have two patterns from animals that we would see in the area. One perhaps more nocturnal and the other diurnal.
Let me see and make sure I can move this.
And so the I guess the one on the right, you notice it has 4 toes in each print, and this one is kind of unusual, and there's 2 side by side, and the smaller ones are next to each other. A classic giveaway, and the one on the right is the bottom track. It's the toes are, if you draw an outline on it, is a J. So
yeah.
I'm sure people might have
some guesses.
Yeah, some experience with these tracks and be able to enter their opinion in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any guessers on that one? On the one on the far right?
And the penny is used for scale. A penny is exactly 3/4 of an inch in diameter.
We don't have any guesses just yet. If folks have a guess on what is on the right, go ahead and type that in. We have Marnie guessing maybe a squirrel. We have someone guessing raccoon, maybe.
Yeah, well,
Raccoon.
actually, so the
Those are both very good guesses.
Yeah, quite a few raccoons.
yeah, so the animal on the right is the squirrel is a good guess because it leaves a similar pattern.
We have a guess of an opossum as well.
Yeah. The one of the giveaways is the number of toes and then the J on the bottom track.
Raccoons have 5 fingers, I believe. Rick?
Yeah, we have
Yes.
Rachel mentioning that raccoons have 5 toes on the front.
Right. So, yeah, so Barris has got the right ID on this track. Or
wow.
Least,
great job, Barris.
Yeah. So this is a brush rabbit, a real small rabbit.
Can you tell us a little bit about its locomotion, Rick? On like why?
Oh yeah. So the so for the rabbit, you have the 2 bottom tracks footprints there are the front feet, and they come down, and then the back feet swing around the body and plant themselves in front. So it's kind of hard to do to mimic that out for humans to mimic it, but that's very easy for the rabbit.
It's also very easy for children.
Yes.
They
have a lot more limber.
We have a question regarding that track. Is the J shape of all 4 feet or of the toes on the hind feet?
The J shape is on the toes on the front feet. So the bottom 2 footprints, you can see the J is kind of upside down and backwards. So you'll see one toe much lower than the other toes. You have 3 toes that are pretty even with each other. And then you have that bottom toe.
Oh, sorry about that. Didn't mean to click.
So on the bottom track, the toe on the right is much lower than the other toes. And you can also tell that's also indicative of the foot. And so that's the right foot. And then the track above that, the outside toe, the lowest toe is the bottom part of the J.
Yep.
Okay, so on to the track next to it. This is a classic track. Kate, Kat, you might have the cursor kind of identify the 4 footprints here.
Yeah, so they're here. I believe this is one and this is one. And if I recall, track pattern is kind of used to identify something we call gait, right?
Right. Well, yeah, that's right. Well, gait describes the way the animal moves. It's so this track pattern is indicative of a gait for a specific animal. but a gait is not really a description of a track pattern. So each gait can have multiple track patterns depending on the speed and the behavior of the animal.
This seems like a pretty small gate
Right.
if there's a penny right next to it.
So this one is a lope, and it's kind of hard to see
It is.
from the pictures, but it's moving from right to left. And this one is a nocturnal animal, and it when threatened, it will raise its tail and point to you. Yes, yeah, a skunk.
Yeah. You know, in other climates, I've heard that you can identify skunks in the snow because they kind of do a belly drag. Is that true?
Yes, that would be another clue, but there are other animals that also belly drag. And it also depends on the depth of the snow.
Awesome. Yeah, I figured. But yeah, you can imagine, I can't imagine a skunk loping. It must be a really slow lope. But he's moving along across that dirt track.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on to the next one.
So sometimes we run into unusual tracks, things that we don't, that we have questions about. And this gives us wonderful opportunities for questions about animal behavior too. So, Rick, could you actually tell us a little bit about the track on the left? Like where exactly did you find this track?
Well, these tracks were taken at the beach in the dunes, and this one is remarkable because it's like a freeway, and there is no evidence of the animal moving off the straight line of travel. And so you go, well, why is it doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. So people can chime in the chat to see, why an animal would be doing this. And you can tell from that with relative size to the grass is that these tracks are pretty small. And while people are writing in, we'll look at also the track on the right. And you see 3 lines. The 2 outside lines are what we call tracker frames to help protect the track from people accidentally stepping over it and not being able to see it. So the photograph is actually kind of getting a little reflection off the center track to highlight it. So people might be able to write in their opinion on that track as well. Yep.
We have some folks guessing sea turtles, maybe sea turtles setting up a nest. For the one on the left-hand side, turtle hatchlings possibly. I believe for the one on the right, a lot of folks are guessing snakes or maybe a couple of different snakes. Or we also have someone on the right guessing it could possibly be a rodent with their tail dragging.
Yeah.
That is a good guess. I like that.
Well, for the one on the right, the since this is the width of the road and you can kind of, well, I don't have a real scale on there to be able to show.
I actually cropped this image. There used to be a person in this image, but
Right. But anyways, you can kind of guess
sorry.
based
Sorry about that. I keep clicking. This mouse is really sensitive.
the
I'm trying to trace it.
yeah. So that's the track, and you can get the relative size based on the tire tracks. So yes, it would be a snake. It's a snake, and the real challenge is to tell which way the snake is moving. And for that, it would require getting down real close to the track and look at the mounding of the dirt on the corners of the track to actually figure out which way the snake was moving.
Do they mound it behind them, kind of? Like as they move to the side, do they mound the dirt kind of behind the coil? That's what I imagine
Yeah,
they do.
yes. So actually, you can kind of tell a little bit, and I think people guess or is were correct in saying that it's moving from bottom to top here.
Yeah, I agree with that. It looks like, because I see some shadows that indicate berms.
Right. So the one on the track on the left is tiny mice tracks and lots of them. And I'm not sure how many different mice use this, but it's like um, uh, people on a freeway. I mean, driving cars on a freeway.
Did we have any guesses as to why they might be doing that? I wonder, like, what they could be doing that, you know, makes it straight beeline from
Right.
point A to
Well,
point B.
yeah.
Did you happen to follow this trail of tracks,
Oh,
Rick?
yeah. Yeah. So it's um, the track is going to a food source and um, into a dense brush, which um, I assume to be its home. I didn't dig around in the brush, but the straightness may indicate that there are predators about and they want to get to the food source in the quickest way possible. That'd be a straight line.
Mm-hmm. This is super cool.
Yeah.
We have Rachel mentioning in the chat that mice have very poor vision and they memorize their routes. And sometimes if the route is kind of changed, because it's been memorized, they can even bump into things, which is a great and
Ah,
interesting fact.
so kind of like an ant, um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, depending on its formic acid leaving a trail to follow the next ant.
Yeah, that's super
Huh.
cool.
Okay, well, I learned something new.
I did too.
Okay, on to the next one.
So, we also wanted to mention a little bit about Scat because, first off, it's really cool. And second, Scat is often a lot more permanent than is tracks. Tracks, you have to get out there pretty early, especially after a rain or something like that. And they might not stick with you. But the scat, like oftentimes you see it over a long time after it's been left there. Um, we hope that you appreciate our graphic, by the way. Um, the the other thing that we did want to mention though is if you are going to go out looking for scat, you do need to be very careful because there are some really deadly diseases out there that can be transmitted through contact and through the air. So you have to handle it with caution. If you do handle it, I don't recommend handling it unless you know what it is. and it's not omnivore or rodent. And make sure that you're using all proper protective equipment when you do so. But as I move on, I do want to mention the glorious variety in scats that you can find from from right to left, we actually have a few different things going on here. We actually have bobcat. So you can usually identify carnivore scat because it's more what we call pincher shaped. It's going to be more tubular. And bobcat in particular tends to be fairly segmented like you see here. Your herbivores, however, are going to have scat that's going to have a lot more vegetative material, and it's going to be more pellet-like or ploppers, as you might want to call them. I don't know. And so we actually have a few different herbivores featured in this picture. If anybody wants to take a guess for the middle two, those are often confused with one another. So I would love to see some guesses in the chat for those. And then the one on the far left, I'm sure everybody knows because it's a very commonly seen scat on our trails. This is horse manure. And as you can see, it definitely has a lot of that organic material in it. It's got rounded shapes. It's going to be very different than cattle manure that we see. Do we have any guesses for the middle two, though? I wanted to see what people guess.
We have we have a couple of guesses. Some folks are thinking the top right might be deer. Also an herbivore in the grass, probably a rabbit for the one in the grass. We have someone thinking bobcat. I'm assuming for the one you just asked for. And then on the left one of the herbivores is so that probably the one is deer. We have some folks thinking top right, thinking deer and elk, possibly. So quite a few different guesses for different pictures.
These are some really good guesses. So the one in the upper right actually features the same animal. If anybody is familiar with rabbits, lagomorphs, hares, they actually will have two different types of scat based on morning pellets versus evening pellets. Rabbits are coprophages, which means that they eat the pellets a second time. And so in this picture here, you actually have morning lightly colored pellets, and then you have more evening pellets, which are the ones that have been processed twice. So that's a really, really fascinating part of their biology if you've ever noticed it. And rabbit pellets tend to be shaped like M&Ms, kind of, sort of. That's the way I see them. Deer, which is actually in the lower middle there, that one is deer, and deer is more like, I don't know, Rick, would you call them like more, not teardrop shaped, but they tend to have a nub at the end, don't they?
Yes. Yeah, and it differs depending on the season.
Mm-hmm.
The
So
springtime being more of, wet, gelatinous drop as opposed to other times of the year where it's more well formed, like we all know.
yeah. So this one field attribute that you might use for identifying scat. The other one is actually what's in it. So this is another fascinating thing for me, but again, you have to be especially careful, especially for raccoon scat, because they do have some parasites in them that that can be transferred to people. So you have to be especially careful. The one on the far, the, the far left. So this one, I never got a positive ID on the animal, but I do know that it ate a bunch of manzanita berries. So that gives you an indication that this animal was probably an omnivore. It's eating berries and, you know. The middle one, however, I believe you told me before what it was, Rick, like who made it, but aren't these coffee berries?
Yes.
Awesome. Do you remember, like, could you identify who made it?
Yeah, I think, well, it was kind of disturbed because it was on a dirt road that gets a lot of foot and dog traffic
Mm.
in the hills here. And I, maybe 2/3 confident that it was a coyote.
Yeah, so that's a good indication. Like, it gives you some information about animal diet. Coyotes, you don't normally think about eating berries and things, but they are actually very omnivorous, and they'll eat things like coffee berry. They'll eat manzanita berry too, which is why I'm not super confident as to the ID of that one on the left. And then the one on the right I found was really incredibly awesome. So more recently, we visited Coyote Ridge, and this was a scat that we found that had a bunch of bones in it. It was segmented like cats, and it has a very large circumference. So could possibly be, I wonder if the chat has already guessed it, but I'm not looking at it right now.
We have a guess of owl for that.
An owl.
Mhm.
That's a good one.
We have bobcat as a guess as well.
Mm-hmm. How about mountain lion?
Susan just typed in mountain lion. Yeah.
Yeah. So with a larger circumference size and the segmented look of it, so I don't have a picture, or I do have a picture, but I didn't show it here, but there was a picture of a large scat on the ground. So not quite owl, though you can find bones in owl pellets, definitely. But still a very, very cool find. So, this is another way in which you can kind of get at the habits of the animals that live around you.
We have a great question. Is size a reliable comparison between mountain lion and bobcat scat?
It isn't size, I believe it's circumference. Yeah, so bobcat, I mean, I don't have the size measurements off the top of my head, but they're going to be a lot smaller than this. This is more, gosh, it was a little thicker than my biggest finger. Like it was actually pretty thick, to say the least. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's bobcat, unless it's a very large bobcat. So I'm more, I lean on it. But again, this is why we look at different attributes. I don't think that it's necessarily mountain lion based on the other attributes that I saw, or not mountain lion, coyote. But again, this is why we investigate it.
Right.
We
Well,
have confidence intervals.
I'm looking it up in the guidebooks. The scat on a bobcat is 7/16 of an inch to 1 inch in diameter.
Mm-hmm.
And the scat on a mountain lion is 3/4 inches to 1 5/8 inches in diameter.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I feel, you know, there is a bit of overlap there. It could possibly be a bobcat. It felt like it was a lot bigger than that, though. I don't know. Betty, you were there. You saw this one with me.
Yeah, it was definitely, as we were walking the trail, we definitely encountered different size of cat, scat, various different sizes. So that's why we were assuming some of them were a mountain lion just due to the size and the circumference of them. We do have an excellent question that I don't know the answer of. They're wondering, what kind of scat would a California condor leave? I have worked at the Oakland Zoo before, and so we did have California condors on exhibit. And so I think of it more as it was like a combination of, there was a lot of white in it, and think of like bird poop on your car. So, but just like bigger version of that. But I don't know if either of you have ever seen California condor scat or poop out in the wild.
I personally have not. But Rick, do you have any idea? Have you encountered that before?
No, I haven't, but it would be very large bird poop, you know, with the ureic plug, the white ureic plug at the end, being a carrion, it might have unusual properties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder, because I mean, a lot of raptors make pellets. Do vultures and condors do the same? I'm not sure if they do. That's a good question for further research. Feel free to reach out to us if you want to find some resources on that one.
Yes, thank you for your question.
All right, and now we are on to the investigation portion. So we actually, we have a couple of pictures to run through, and I want to be respectful of people's time as well. So we might only do 2 of these. This first one is, you are on a dirt road in early spring near Santa Teresa County Park, and you are approaching a stream bed and a bridge that goes over 2 small 1.5-foot culverts. You have late afternoon sun on your back, and you notice these impressions in the earth. Nearby, you pick up an old deer mandible to compare the size. And given what we know about wildlife, what do you think, and what questions might you ask? I'll give people a couple of minutes to think about this one.
Guesses are coming in, but we have 1 so far, 2, both of them saying mountain lion.
Right. So based on the beginning slides, we see the double lobe on the front part of the heel pad, the track on the right.
Oh, sorry about that. This mouse, I hate it. All right. Yes.
The track on the right is underneath the track on the left. So that's also a very good indicator of which is the front foot and which is the back foot. You can see that the metacarpal pad is very large compared to the toes. The also indicator of toes, on cats, in particular mountain lions, it's kind of a teardrop shaped toe, no claws there, and the track is asymmetrical. So, and then the size, you can tell from the mandible, is pretty large, like at least 4 inches in diameter. So yes, the guess on the mountain lion is what I would also guess, and that I would not really want to bend down to take a picture since that looks pretty fresh without first checking the area.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
We have a quick question. We have someone that said, Rick just mentioned the distance between the lobes. She was wondering, what is that again? What is the distance again?
The distance. So I just lost my mouse, but the lobes are actually these. This is the leading part of the metacarpal pad, what I'm outlining with my cursor. And those are often with cats, they're 2-lobed, they're double-lobed. With canids, they're 1. And often the metacarpal pad for canids are triangular shaped. They have the 1 lobe on the top and then maybe 2 on the bottom. Whereas mountain lions or other cats or felines are going to have 3 lobes on the bottom if it's a really good print. This one, however, you know, you have the 1 track on top of the other. So it's very hard to tell what happened with the bottom edge. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, and cats, they often when they walk, it's a direct register. So oftentimes you rarely get a clear front track.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to jump to our yellow jacket example. Okay, Rick?
Yes.
And then we'll wrap up because I want to be respectful of people's time. But so Rick, why don't you tell us about this one?
All right.
What was happening here?
Yeah. So one lunchtime I was wandering around and I noticed this small cave in the hillside. So I went over to investigate. And yeah. And then I found a hole full of yellow jackets. And then I proceeded to move very slowly and carefully because I did not want to end up being chased by a bunch of yellow jackets. So I was wondering, well, what could have made this hole? What could have why would these yellow jackets all milling about in the hole? Okay.
What else did you find?
And then expanding my view out a little more, I noticed all the paper nesting honeycomb and a bunch of scat. And you can see the penny down at the bottom for scale to get an idea of the size of the scat. And I'm going, oh, let's see, what animals like to dig up yellow jackets? And I go, oh, skunks. Because this is a hill just south of Santa Teresa Park. And I was kind of going through the list of animals in my mind of what would be in the area. And I go, oh yeah, I remember reading skunks really like to dig up yellow jacket nests, their ground nests. And then I kind of moved on until just recently, I went back and looked at this slide and looking at the size of the scat and the tubular nature of the scat, I learned that upon consulting my guidebooks that will have references behind, that this is also a looks like raccoon scat. And then upon further reading and talking with other people, that yes, raccoons also like to dig up yellow jacket ground nests. So I have since revised my opinion that this was now done by a raccoon instead of a skunk.
Awesome.
And so
Yeah.
you can see in the scat. So I think this it's really funny that the scat is right outside where the raccoon was feasting on the yellow jackets. It was probably had to make space for eating all the yellow jackets. So their seeds and um, insect parts in the scat. So it's pretty cool to see that.
Yeah. I know you can actually see some of the insect parts in here. Like, I thought this photo was fascinating just because all of the indigestible parts of the insect seem to come out the other end. It was really fascinating to see all those little parts.
Yes, the yellow jackets do make ground nests, and they excavate it, and they build a little entrance tower to the nest. And I've since come across another yellow jacket nest where it has a custom built entrance, and so that's part of their excavation.
It's very
Either
cool.
that or they, I don't know if they um, fully excavate or they take over a rabbit den and then build upon that. So that's an open question for me.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we are a little bit over time, and I want to give you guys an opportunity to ask some questions, talk about resources, and also talk about the track recording device that you can make. So I'm going to actually move on ahead. So we actually build a lot of track traps at the Open Space Authority. You might not notice them because they're actually very, very simple and very easy. And this is something that you can do in your own backyard. You can even get your kids involved. It's a really simple thing. You get yourself some sand or soft substrate. You can put it in a pan and you can actually move it around your yard to see what kind of tracks you might get in different places. But the best way is to think about where animals might be moving. So we often find good spots along the edges of trails, going from different resources on our properties, around water especially, in order to build track traps. And often it's just smoothing out the substrate, finding a good bunch of sand or dirt or something like that, and you just smooth it out and then you check back later to see what kind of tracks you might find. And we will do that also to find out good spots for where animals are moving and to put in our wildlife cams. So this is all like a really good, easy way to think about wildlife in your own backyard and just setting aside a space to do some of your own recording. I'm going to get to resources, and I think at that point we're going to go ahead and take questions. So these are all resources that Rick and I have recommended to get started on if you guys are interested in like furthering your research on tracking. It's often like a lifelong building skill. Neither of us consider ourselves experts in it. We're amateurs by far, but it is really rewarding. So you can go ahead and take a look at some of these resources, write them down, and I'm willing to take questions if y'all don't mind.
Yeah, I might just mention the first four are books. The 5 and 6 are Facebook groups that you can join. 7 is a YouTube video, a 40-minute video, which is very good. And then Kim Cabrera's site is also very good. And so the easiest one to start out with would be, say, number 7, Jonah Evans, Intro to Animal Track Identification. That would be the easiest, and you can just search for that phrase on YouTube and you can find it. And then Kim Cabrera's site, bear_tracker.com.
Very cool. And do
Kat,
we have any questions?
We did have a couple questions. So folks were asking and very interested about the yellow jackets. So some were wondering if that was like an abandoned rabbit hole, and or do yellow jackets dig out holes that size?
Yes, this is part of my continuing education, and that I have to research. I do not know the answer to that. I know that I've seen structures built by yellow jackets that are not part of the landscape, the baseline landscape, but I don't know about the excavation of them. And then, yeah, so.
I feel like yellow jackets might take advantage of burrows. It just seems like a lot of effort for a lot of yellow jackets to make their own burrow.
Yeah, so I mean, it could be, a jackrabbit hole, since I know that the jackrabbits do the burrows, but not because they're I've seen them in that area, but I don't know if they take over abandoned burrows or not.
Susan did mention in the chat that she had a rat hole once and the rat had died, and then yellow jackets used that for food and for a home. So that's a great share there. We also have, how do skunks and raccoons defend against stings, especially around eyes, nose, and mouth from those yellow jackets when they're trying to get some of that for food?
Well, in one of the books here, number 3, tracking, Paul Resendez writes that his observations are the raccoons have a high tolerance for pain, and that they have a thick fur, but as far as their nose, I don't know how they manage that. Oh, well, I do want to say that skunks are nocturnal, and so when the temperatures drop, so that picture was taken the 20th of December several years ago, and so it was very cool out, and the yellow jackets are very slow moving, so the temperature probably got down into maybe the high 30s, and the yellow jackets are sitting ducks for the raccoons and skunks. So yeah. I doubt that there was much fight back.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We did have someone that really would love to see the other examples. So if I know people might have to log off, but if there are a couple of folks that, if you guys are willing to stay a little bit later after to kind of just show those other examples, that's someone that they said that's the best part, and they're really excited if you have the time for that.
We do. We can do that. Rick, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
Awesome. Perfect. And then we had Mike Hunt sharing that badgers also love bees and will dig up holes to get at the honey, which is a really cool fact there. Rachel was mentioning that brush rabbits don't dig burrows, so they think it might be something other than a rabbit hole there. And Rhonda was mentioning how yellow jackets dig out holes. They had one in their yard that was for sure not a burrow. So they saw some activity of them maybe digging some stuff up. And so they Rachel was just clarifying that they do use burrows made by something else, but they do not dig their own burrows.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
thank you all for sharing that.
Yeah, this is like the best part of doing programs like this, is that we get to collect and share knowledge with each other. And that I think is the best part, is learning from you guys as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to those other slides then. Okay, so we kind of skipped. Here we go. This one's a good one. And I must say, a shout out to Jennifer Moore, one of our other volunteers, for getting this photo to me.
Kat, I have a meeting, so I'm going to head out. But maybe once I leave, I think you can make Rick co-host, and I don't know if that helps in any way, but thank you all. I hope you enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you, Betty, for joining us and for manning the tech side.
Yes, of course. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Yep. So you're walking along a sandy trail in the oak woodland forest just after a recent dousing of rain, and the trail is picking up tracks really well. So what do you guys notice, and what questions might you ask about this particular track? Sorry about that. So I will open up the chat, because now I need to open up the chat. Oh my gosh, where did it go? There we go. I want the chat. Perfect. Chop shape looks feline. One paw looks bigger than the other. Are there many of these tracks? Looks like a small mountain lion, some multiple cubs, round, 2 lobes, no claws, segmented stat. No size guide, but I guess bobcat. So the size guide is actually the lid of this water bottle too. She had a lid of a water bottle here. It's not absolutely great, but I think she put it there so you could crop it out. But yes, you guys are spot on. Very feline looking. This is a C shape to it. And one thing that Jennifer mentioned to me, like after she took this and sent it to me, was that actually there were lots of tracks nearby. And so what do you think about, like, does this scat look new? Or does this scat look old to you? And the second question is, if there were lots of tracks nearby, what might this cat be doing? Like if it's, a lot of close tracks near each other. Anybody? Nothing? The scat looks fresh. I don't know, Rick, does this scat look fresh to you?
Yes. I mean, I'm wondering if the dirt around the scat has any indication.
It looks like the scat happened and then it rained, because it's kind of puddling up around the
Right.
scat.
And there's no footprints immediately around the scat, unless it looks, well, I'd have to see more of the area to really build up a story as to, and be able to interpret what happened. But the white scat looks much older than the dark scat. The dark scat looks like it's, it has from an animal that ate meat. And the first part of the dark is segmented, which would suggest cat. And it looks like the last part was trying to be segmented. You can see it starting to break apart.
Yeah. So, yeah, when Jennifer told me about this one, she mentioned to me she was under the impression that this bobcat here kind of wandered over to it and was reading the newspaper, so to speak. Sniffed around it and then wandered off because there were other tracks kind of around and close to it. So, I mean, I think that's probably a pretty decent interpretation, though I wish I had another picture of it. But yeah, this is I'm fairly certain that this is bobcat. But just based on the segmentation, as Rick had mentioned. But it could be something else, because I mean that twisting back there is also indicative, I think, more of coyote. And then the fact that you have older scat here also raises some questions. You know, I think Rick, you mentioned that coyotes are more likely to come back to the same spot and use it again.
Right.
So these are all like different traits that you might look for when you're like trying to identify or trying to figure something out. Coyotes also like to leave scat noticeably on trails. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep.
Whereas bobcats like to hide it. But the other ones that I had, this one was another really good one by Rick. So Rick, why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened with this story, I guess. What led you to this spot and what did you find?
All right. Well, this is down near the scenes and getting into a river bottom area where the river is kind of dried up and leaving a big mud flat. And so that drew us there as trackers because of the plethora of tracks that are preserved in the mud. And this one is a track that I really clear track that I've never seen before. And you can see from the penny the scale of the prints up close. And if you just looked at those, you might think, oh, those are two separate animals. But then when you look at the full step back and look at the big picture, you can see the tracks going off into the mud.
So Rick, did we ever decide whether these were connected like this, or because I don't see any tracks in between? That's the thing that keeps making me throwing me off about this set. Does anybody no idea have any idea what this might be, or who or what they might be doing?
So while people are typing in, the tracks are on the left picture are well preserved. It's solidly fixed in the mud, and the mud is actually very thick, and the cracks are beginning to form in the mud. And it formed very nicely to kind of show the tracks without breaking right in the middle of the tracks. It's kind of unusual to actually see the toes on these.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, is that 1, 2, 3? There's up to 4 on some of these. And it's right near a water source. It was, so Mike, this was near Pisceans, near a riverbank. That had, did you just say it was recently flooded, Rick?
Yeah, so this is like April timeframe.
Yeah. And I mean, look at this, the size reference too. Like, that's an important indication too for this particular type of animal. It's a really small, fairly small animal. And a big hint is actually this thing way back here.
So yeah, where the mud is softer and the feet are sinking down into the mud.
A weasel type animal. Does anybody have any other ideas? I like these ideas. Weasel type animal, mustelid like otter, beaver. That's a bit large for some of our size reference. And this is an animal that we haven't actually spoken about yet either.
But you can find them on the Open Space Authority properties.
Yes. They're one of our protected species. They're very cute. Yes. Yes, Richard, got it. It's a turtle. This is did you say, Rick, this was a Western pond turtle?
Yes, that's our best guess.
Yeah. And what do you think, like we were discussing this before, but what do you think he was doing? Because he went down and then I can't quite tell if this was a track coming back up or whether this is also going down. Did you have an opportunity to investigate that more closely?
Yeah, so this was a couple years ago and I can't remember.
Sounds like you need to work on some nature journaling so you can record these things.
Yes, that is true. It's not enough just to take pictures and then hope to interpret them in subsequent years.
Hmm. But yeah, if you guys don't see it, there's a tail drag and there's a shell imprint up there. Yeah, turtles.
Yeah, so
Love them.
turtles have 5 uh, toes in the front and 4 in the back.
Oh, okay. So I did see one with 4, and it was kind of hard for me to see the imprint for 5. And was this a time of year when turtles would be coming out and laying eggs along banks?
I don't know.
Do you remember whether it was like springtime? Because that's something that the
Yeah,
turtles
I
will
think it was
do.
April.
Yeah. The turtles come out when they're gravid and they're finding a good spot along the bank to lay their eggs. So very well could have been a female, but we don't know based on Rick's recollection. I have one more for you guys, and then we'll have to wrap it up. Okay. So Jennifer Moore wanted me to show this one. It's still a track. Would the turtle be cooling off? I think the turtle would try to cool off in the water. Yeah. Turtles lay eggs away from the shore, generally up on the hillside per Joe Beely. Yeah. Rick, do you recall whether that turtle, like the tracks were going up the hillside or anything?
No, uh, it
It
was
stayed
pretty,
along the shore?
it was pretty flat, but on the other side of the bank, So not from where I was standing taking the picture, but on the other side of the river, there was a hillside. And so maybe that would be where it would be going. Yeah, because that makes sense, because when the mud hardens, it is very hard.
Yeah.
And yeah, it would find it hard to imagine that a baby turtle would be able to break through the crust of mud. So that would be a good reason to have a nest on the hillside.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, Samuel, you just gave it right away. Um, and Rachel, technically you are correct. Birds are dinosaurs. I don't have a size reference, unfortunately, but I wanted to show you guys this one because it's not often that you get to see fossils. So this is a fossil image of dinosaur prints. I'm not sure entirely what kind of dinosaur, but Jennifer mentioned to me that she found these at Mill Canyon and wanted to throw one in there that was kind of like a spoof, kind of something just to keep an eye out for, because you never know if you're going to see something geological. Awesome. So I'm going to come back to references, and then I think we're going to go ahead and sign off. I would like to recommend to you guys, since you guys seem to be super enthusiastic about tracks, if you guys have questions, feel free to email me. My email is khill@openspaceauthority.org. So if you guys are interested, if you want like a list of the references, for example, I can send that to you. If you are scrambling to write it down. Otherwise, I do have a time limit, unfortunately. I love getting to do this, but I'm like, oh no, I gotta eat lunch. Did anybody have any other particular questions? No more questions? Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate this. This is a lot of fun. Again, if you have any other questions for me or for Rick, you can always email me and I can ask him later. It's khill@openspaceauthority.org. And yeah, and I really appreciate the feedback and everything. Like, we want to do these exploratory sessions where we kind of explore a topic and help you get some great information so you can explore further. Yay! Thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and close the session, and you all have a good weekend, okay? Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
And